Hello and welcome to Strategic Speaking for Results. I'm Elizabeth Bachman, your host, and today I want to talk about adapting, how you adapt your speech to a shorter or longer time slot. Have you ever found yourself preparing for, say, a 30-minute presentation and the person before you runs way too long? And suddenly you have to cram your speech into 15 minutes or 10 minutes. Or on the other hand, have you ever been invited to speak and you prepared a 15-minute presentation and they say, actually, we are running way ahead and the person behind you just canceled. Could you talk for an hour? Well, often, if you're not prepared for that sort of thing, if you haven't had a chance to think about it, you suddenly find yourself stumbling, fumbling, making things up, and your wonderfully prepared, elegant presentation sounds terrible. There are ways to plan for it, and that's what today is about. Let me get myself. My client, Pamira, was working for a tech company that provided a service to large companies. And she had a chance to make a presentation to the CEO of a new client. She'd been working with the sales team. They were all excited. And now she was going to present to the CEO. She had her 30-minute presentation ready for question and answers and all of that. But she was starting out with a good 15-minute presentation. But the CEO was late. People she was talking to were nervous. She was nervous. The CEO was late and late again and late again. And finally, 15 minutes later, the CEO joined the call and hallelujah, she was going to get a chance to talk to him. But by that time, she was so flustered that she spent half the time apologizing. The rest of the time she spent rushing through her presentation. She skipped one of the most important pieces, the piece that she'd prepared and was really ready to say things. And then the CEO said, thanks a lot, gotta go, and hung up. And there she was, she blew it. The CEO later said to his team, why did you have me talk to this lady, Pamira? She doesn't have a clue what she's doing. She was really unprepared. I didn't really like her at all. So she lost the account. There are ways to plan for this. And my intention today is to show you how you can plan for flexibility, how you can shorten or lengthen a speech, as long as you are ready. It's not that hard. You just have to think about it in advance. It's when we get caught by surprise that we get in trouble. Planning for flexibility. This comes when you are preparing your presentation. It comes when you are writing your speech, and it comes from having a really good outline. First of all, start with what you want them to do. What do you want them to do when you're done? For Pamira, it was, let's have a conversation about hiring my company. Or it might be, send a donation to my nonprofit. Or it might be with your team. It might be, let's move ahead with the next step. Maybe you're speaking to upper management. You want them to approve what your team is doing. Maybe you're speaking to other departments and you want them to help you with something. There's many things. You decide, who are you talking to? What do you want them to do? And then reverse engineer your speech. Start from the end and work backwards. I like to use the classic 5-point formula. This is a way I learned about writing an essay when I was in 8th grade. So I was 13 years old. And thank you, Mrs. Curtis, for making me do it and bugging me until I got it right, because it took me a while. I wasn't so good at following directions. This actually comes from Roman rhetoric. So this formula has been with us for centuries. If you're just listening, this is a good thing to write down. Write the numbers 1 through 7 vertically on your page. Number 1 is your introduction. Number 2 is talking point A. Number 3 is talking point B. Number 4 is talking point C. And number 5 is the conclusion plus the call to action. What do you want them to do? Now, I've seen many, many speakers get stuck on their introduction. They get started and they have to get talking point A great, and then they never get around to B and C. The key is start at the end. First, just make a list, just these 5 points. What is your conclusion? What do you want them to do when they've finished listening to you? Then, what are your 3 talking points that will lead to that conclusion? All 3 should be most leading directly to this conclusion. Now, this is the part I learned at 8th grade, and the introduction tells you what you're going to do. For instance, you just heard me say what my intentions are. My intentions were to tell you how to adapt the timing of your speech, and my 3 talking points were planning for flexibility, that's the one we're on now, how to shorten, and how to lengthen. As you do this, however, here's where we get into the subtleties and the expertise of speaking. You have your talking points. Now the question is, how do you choose the best talking point? If you have less time, here's what you're going to do. Think of your speech as a countdown timer, not a stopwatch. A lot of speakers will start out and they'll start at the beginning and they'll just go till they're done. That happens all the time, and that's where you get in trouble. That's what happened to Pamira. She started at the beginning, she wanted to get all her points in, and she ran out of time to ask the crucial question, which was, so Mr. CEO, how can we work together? Let me show you how you can work together. If you think of your speech as a countdown, Pamira thought she had 30 minutes, then she thought she had 20. Ultimately, she only had 15. If she had planned for it, she would have been able to come out with her speech the way she wanted to without getting flustered. If you need to shorten the speech, always do your full conclusion with the call to action. Always do your full talking point C. The 3rd talking point is the one, it should be your best story. Your story about how you helped that client. Your story about how your idea made a difference. Your story how this is going to really matter to the people you're listening to. Because of course, it's all about the listeners and what they're looking for. So what's the best, juiciest story you can tell? And then let that lead into the conclusion and the call to action. This isn't always the way you want to do it. Sometimes there's a sequence. For instance, today there's actually a sequence that I'm using. But if you can have the last one be the best, that's what you want to do. Then you want to make sure that your second best talking point is point A, because that's going to get their attention. Talking point B should be the one that you could do in 1 or 2 sentences if you needed to. That's your safety valve. That's where, if you suddenly have less time, you can shorten that, and you could say, the second thing I wanted to tell you was this and this. It's a little shorter, but I really want to get to the most important piece, which is talking point C. Thus, if you are shortening, never shorten the end. So many people get into trouble this way. Never shorten the end. You really want to get talking point C right and exciting, and then lead into your conclusion so that they're all excited and they're excited to do what you want them to do. If you have even less speech, you shorten talking point A into 1 sentence or 2 sentences, talking point B into 2 sentences. But then go into depth on talking point C. That's going to be your best, your most exciting one. What happens if suddenly you have more time? What happens if you have to fill the time? As you are lengthening the speech, as you're writing your speech, make sure that for each of your talking points, you have stories you can tell. And make sure that you can answer the yeah, but moments. This is something I've talked about in other broadcasts, where these are the small objections where people say, yeah, that's true, but what about? Those are I think of them as the splinter that's going to catch on your sweater and make a run. The yeah, but moments are the short moments, the short things that people are obsessing about, and then they're not listening to you. You have this for talking point C and for talking points A and B. Make sure you have 2 or 3 stories to tell. Make sure that you can answer your yeah, but. They won't say the yeah, but they'll just be thinking it. So you could be saying, now you're probably thinking, I know all this. That happens with your team all the time. They're thinking, yeah, I know this. You've told us this. So then you say, well, yes, I know you may thinking you know this, but here's the part that's new, or here's the part we should really pay attention to. Actually, as an aside, this is a good thing to have preparing for a question and answer session. If you are doing a program where you are expecting to answer questions, make sure that you have stories and yeah, but moments for each of the talking points. Because what if nobody asks the question? That's always deadly. If no one's going to ask a question, then you can say, one of the questions I get a lot is, or let me tell you how this applied with my client and how we solved the program. As long as you are prepared, all of these stories should be polished so that you can tell them quickly and concisely. The yeah, buts should be quick and concise. But you can always layer more of them in and more of them in until you have you're using the full amount. One other thing with a live presentation is make sure that you have points of interaction for every talking point. So if you have extra time, make sure that there are places where people will answer in the chat if you're doing it virtually. Or if you can have people raise their hand, ask them a question, have them raise their hand. I would not ask for questions on each point on a public presentation. With a meeting, yes, but with a public presentation where you're timed, don't do that until the end, because it's really easy for somebody to ask a long, rambling question that takes up your time, and then you run out of chance to actually finish what you're trying to say. Better to save, in a public presentation that's being timed, save the questions for afterwards. All of these points you have on hand, print them out, write them out, make sure that you have a little notepad so you know what you can do, and be prepared for the lengthening. All of these possibilities are ways to plan for flexibility. Be ready. Be ready, because you never know. You never know what's going to happen. If you have any questions about this, or questions about how your presentation skills are, you can reach out to me, elizabeth@elizabethbachman.com, or on this platform. And if you're curious about how your presentation skills are going, then you can take my free 4-minute quiz at speakforresultsquiz.com. That's speakforresultsquiz.com. This has been Elizabeth Bachman, and I'll see you on the next one.